of.
I know. One of these days you'll teach me how to use that thing.
I know. Well, this is like my little secret, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can't give away all the tricks.
I know. It's like you hide it and it's
Yeah.
gone. And on Friday I couldn't find. We're talking about. Oh, hi, by the way.
Hey,
DTLT
nice of you to
today.
join us.
Happy Monday, everyone.
Yeah. So you handled everything fine on Friday, I saw.
Well, I mean, I guess I tried to do a show that I don't know was somewhat personal, and
Yeah.
it kind of got me right here, and hopefully it connected with people out there. But I'm also glad now to have somebody to throw some stuff back to if I need
Yeah.
to, if I get stuck.
And to not have Jim here to tell you how much your topic sucks, that's always nice.
Yeah, or coming in late,
Right.
the usual things that
Freedom
he
of doing
does.
that.
We were talking a little bit about the iPad app
Yeah.
that Tim uses to control shots and that sort of thing, and I didn't talk to Tim or ask Tim how he actually did that, so I would have needed to program that to do all the shots and that sort of thing, and so maybe one of these days I'll learn how to do that. But it's
I
definitely
blogged
cool.
about that, and Wirecast picked it up, which
That's
is
right.
kind of cool. Yeah.
That's right.
I'm getting quite a bit of traffic from that.
I think
on my blog,
we'll
so.
hopefully make a lot of contributions to Wirecast and the people out there and try to give them some good information.
Yeah.
But so, Tim, what are we talking about today?
Today, we are talking actually about something that Will Richardson, he tweeted about it, but he blogged about it too. I'll pull up my screen here so people can see. He was talking about a school that he would want his kids to go to, and it's actually a school not started yet. They're going to start in fall of 2013 by a guy named Steve Goldberg. It's in the Research Triangle of North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that's interesting in and of itself. It's just going to be a middle school. From what I can tell, it's going to be a private school. You have to apply to get in, that kind of thing, which we can get into and talk about because I think that would be interesting. But what I thought was really cool is that Steve is actually blogging his process of how he's teaching his current students. He's teaching at Carey Academy right now, and he's got a website, What I Learned Today. It's wiltoday.wordpress.com.
Good old WordPress.
Yeah. And what I like about it is, I mean, the blog posts that he puts up there are extremely extensive, but it's sort of like, here's what I'm doing in my class right now. And he's modeling this sort of active learner environment, this type of idea that you can get your students actively engaged in the topics that you're talking about. A lot of things that he's been putting up recently are current events type stuff with the stock market. What does it mean when it drops? What is the Dow Jones? Asking really good questions and sort of saying, let's explore it together.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me immediately by that post, and right now, if you look at the site, he's got 3 different parts to the idea of the economy and what's going on with the economy right now. But I think one of the neatest things, and it's something that any teacher could start right away with, and that's having the students come up with the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of the teacher being the front and center, here's what you will learn today, here's the questions that I want you to answer. He basically emphasizes and encourages them to come up with their own questions, to look through the article and see about the stuff that they don't know, and see what the answers are to some of those things, like what is the S&P and what does a AAA rating mean, and that sort of thing.
I was just reading a book the other day. I'm really way behind on it, Freakonomics, which I don't know how long ago it came out.
Right.
But they talked about how one of the biggest process of learning is finding the right question to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's huge here. You're getting people involved by asking the right questions. I don't know if you follow a guy by the name of Dan Meyer. He does math type stuff.
Yeah, right.
And he
That's
started the any question or any Q's thing on Twitter. And his idea was basically along the same lines. If you can ask the right question or show them a video to where they're asking the questions about it, how big did that pool have to be in order for him to dive into it and not hit his head and crack his skull and that kind of thing?
Yep.
Then they're like, well, we've got to find this out. And then you get into that exploratory part of it.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it just, to me, it allows the students to own their learning.
Mm-hmm.
They come up with the things, they own it. They have that stake in it, and I think that drives it home. Whatever the students are interested in, and I don't know how much we want to talk about the actual posts and that sort of thing. I think it's a neat way to go about it. The what I learned today. But it's this whole idea of reflection and that sort of thing. which I think is really important.
It's great that he's putting that stuff out in the open for other teachers to pull off of and
Exactly.
say, I could use that in my classroom. I could, you could model exactly what he's doing and have great results for a current events class or
Right.
something like that, which is awesome. I'd love to know. I wish he almost would do sort of a meta post about the tools that he's using. I
Yeah,
don't know if he's
exactly.
using a smartboard or maybe an iPad or something. You can see that he's annotating across web pages.
Yep.
So one of the first things he does is he goes to a newspaper website, Washington Post, New York Times, or maybe CNN.com,
Right.
and he starts circling key topics, words,
Mm-hmm.
things where the questions come from. Well, who is that person? Circle their name. We're going to
Yep.
figure out who that person is, and that kind of thing. He's also pulling in YouTube videos when there's like longitude and latitude coordinates. He said, okay, well, we'll pull those into Google Earth
Yeah.
and see exactly where it is, see if my students know where that actually is, so you
Exactly.
have perspective when you're reading these stories. And I'm as guilty as anyone of reading these things and not really always understanding them.
Mm-hmm.
You read about the stock market and what's going on with the economy, and you go, oh yeah, the economy's down and this and that or whatever, but you don't really have a full grasp of all the players involved and what's going on with it.
Right. Right.
So
And that always reminds me of the idea that to be a citizen of the world these days
Yeah.
is very difficult, and I think people kind of don't ever realize or don't ever even talk about the idea that it takes a lot to keep up with this stuff.
It really does.
To even have a political conversation about what this party or that party is doing, and not really getting into the politics of it, but to have the arguments out there, it's really difficult because there is so much to just the economy and figuring out, well, this does this, and it's not always, A causes B. It's A and then all these other factors and that sort of thing. And what I do like to, see him doing is just kind of get the students thinking about what it means to be a citizen. And sometimes it comes across, I guess, as a little bit, utopian, and you wonder, certainly in the situation that he's in with the, if it's a private school, he can do that to a certain extent. How much can you do this in a public school?
Yeah.
How much can you get away with saying we're going to study just about everything in school and not have the school board kind of go crazy or the parents go crazy about what you're teaching my son or daughter what?
Well, it goes right back to this idea of standardized testing,
Right.
and you've got teachers who are pulled in every direction just to get the basics down of what
Exactly.
needs to be covered on a certain test, and they don't have time to open up the Washington Post and worry about what's going on today, because they've got to make sure that these kids know what happened 200 years ago, because that's what they're getting tested on. They're not
Right.
going to get tested on what happened in the Fed last week, and that
Right. And I think back, and it was so long ago, I guess, first of all, but high school and remembering back to those days, the thing that I always remember the most and enjoying the most was my current events class. And I don't know if that speaks to the type of person that I am or whatever, but that was the cool thing was always kind of seeing what was actually happening, the stuff that you saw on the news that day, and talking about that in class, and being able to talk with your peers, your friends about it. It wasn't artificial. You got into this really legitimate discussion, and that's one of the things that I've always talked about, is getting away from this artificial learning, putting out these artificial problems to try to solve, as opposed to let's look at some real problems and see if we can't come up with solutions to those. So I really do appreciate his approach. He also talks about emphasizing lifelong learning, having a strong sense of community. Students, here's an interesting one: students discover and pursue their own passion. Crazy
So-
talk.
Okay, so these are the things going on with the school that he's going to be creating then.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that's interesting about following the you get a tweet from somebody and then they show you a web page. What I love to do after that is kind of dig in deep
Dig in
and see
and
about
see.
who is this person.
Yeah.
What's his background, what other stuff has he done, follow other links. He's got links to spouse and that sort of thing, and you really find out. And it's interesting that all this stuff can even happen these days. You share these somewhat intimate portraits of these people, and you find out more about what they are. But yeah, the school that he's talking about, this TLC, or the what does he call it?
Triangle Learning Community.
Triangle Learning Community. And there's all the stuff is out there. I'm looking at a Word document that's this kind of 16-page proposal, and just some really interesting stuff. Again, it makes me kind of wonder whether this could be something that a public school could even attempt these days, especially with the testing kind of emphasis. But
and I mean, I don't want to guess his reasoning, but I worry about these approaches where it's like, I feel like I've got these great methods for learning, these great methods of teaching. This is what I would want for my kids, so I'm going to go start a private school
right.
where these kids can go to. And it's clearly a very select group of kids. It's only going to be a middle school, only for certain years. By 9th grade, they're going back into the public school system.
Right.
And, small handful, maybe 20 students total that are going to go into this school system, I call it, and I wonder about that process, because it's this idea that we can cultivate and nurture this select group of kids, but everybody else, screw them.
Yeah, I mean, that in itself is kind of artificial.
Yeah.
And you wonder whether that can be, I guess maybe he's hoping that the students will kind of infect the public school population and maybe turn things around. I don't know.
If I was a student and I came out of this into 9th grade in a public school system, I'd be frustrated.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I would come into that and go, seriously, we're doing what
right.
in high school?
Yeah,
you want me to...
where's my Wall Street Journal?
Right.
I need I need to start learning from this instead of from this book that you gave me. So yeah, and I think what we can do is kind of take some of the positive things out of this and apply them in virtually any place. We do some of that stuff here at Mary Washington, but he talks specifically about project-based learning.
Yeah.
He talks specifically about blogging for reflection, and that kind of stuff. It at a very minimum level, we can kind of infuse, I think, in any of these kinds of situations and encourage students to do that. One of the things that struck me about this, and I don't have my timer, so I think we've got a couple more minutes.
We've got a few minutes, yeah.
He talks a little bit, and maybe let me just bring up the document again just to see, but he talks about some of the different areas that he wanted to cover, and he actually gives there's a schedule that he sets out. He talks about the community meeting to start with, a morning session. They talk about math and that sort of thing, but he gets to a point where he wants to figure out what stuff they're going to use for assessment and other things, and other feedback and that sort of thing. But one of the things that I found missing that I started to think about was this idea of socializing. One of the things that students go to school for in many ways, for no other reason in some cases, is to go and socialize.
Yeah.
And he kind of he covers everything else in terms of what students should do and participating in a community and that sort of thing. But there isn't any emphasis in socialization, and I wonder where that fits in. And I don't know. I might have read it at a different time and not have even thought about something like that. But I wonder how much we want to build into the curriculum the idea of socializing, and whether students would want to do it on their own anyway, and wouldn't want to be told, okay, now it's time to socialize, whether that's artificial. But just something that struck me that I wondered, could this be put into a curriculum somehow?
Yeah, and I would love to see his model of the What I Learned Today website spread out to all of his teachers, where all of the teachers involved in this triangle learning community, and maybe even the students.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you've got 7th, 8th grade students who are blogging their process of learning alongside the teacher saying, this is what I'm trying to do with them, and you've got that whole community doing that out in the open, that's where I think you can get the advantage of that private school out in the open for everybody else to appreciate and benefit from.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's right on. And been thinking about, and I debated about talking about this on Friday, but I really wanted to have at least one other person to kind of bounce ideas off of. But I think this is a great find by you, and it certainly fits in kind of well with what we're doing, and hope other people can kind of enjoy the stuff that was pointed to in this article. And I encourage you to kind of dig behind the scenes. One other thing I did want to mention was the screencast that he did. He used Google Earth. Real nice lesson plan. It was just starting with a simple image of a ship that was like cut in half
Mm-hmm.
and split apart. And it was like, well, where do they do this kind of ship, you know, decommissioning or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And so it got into the idea of, well, it takes place in Pakistan or India or, you know, a place other than the United States. And,
Right.
you know, they take these big ships apart and, you know, because of labor costs. And so it really can provide this kind of rich lesson
Yeah.
that you can go to different places and you know, use the technology that we have at our fingertips to do. So
That's great. Well, the website is wiltoday.wordpress.com. I'm going to put it in the show notes, so definitely check that out. Keep an eye on that, and here's hoping that, you know, schools like that will open up not just in the private sector, but we'll see more and more teachers engaging their students in these ways in the future. So,
exactly.
all right, Andy.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
All right, bye.
Nice job. See you guys.